Welcome to Easy English Talks podcast.
Do you want to improve your listening and speaking skills in English? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you understood everything around you, but still struggled to speak fluently? This episode is for you. Today, we're diving into real-life stories, personal experiences, and examples that will help improve your listening and speaking abilities. By the end of this episode, you'll not only be able to understand more complex English conversations, but you'll also be able to express your thoughts with more confidence. Let's get started with a question. Have you ever been in a foreign country, struggling to communicate, but slowly realizing that you're picking up more and more of the language? I remember the first time I traveled to Italy. I was eager to speak Italian, but my skills were limited to just basic phrases. One day, I found myself at a cafe, trying to order a simple coffee. The barista spoke so fast that I felt like I was lost in translation. But then, something clicked. The more I listened, the more I understood. It wasn't just about the words. It was a combination of sounds, context, and gestures. Slowly, I began to form my responses. And by the end of that week, I was speaking with confidence. This experience taught me that listening is a crucial part of speaking. The more you listen to real-life conversations, the easier it becomes to understand the flow of language and the expressions that native speakers use. If you want to speak like a native, you have to listen like one too. And that's what we're focusing on today. How to improve your listening skills through real-life stories and examples that mirror C1 and C2 level English. Now, let me tell you about my friend, Sarah. Sarah grew up in the United States, but after college, she moved to Spain for a job. At first, she could barely understand the Spanish spoken around her. But Sarah didn't give up. She started watching local TV shows and listening to podcasts in Spanish. It was tough at first. Some words were hard to catch, and the speed of the conversations was overwhelming. But over time, she began to recognize common phrases, idioms, and slang. One day, while attending a work meeting, Sarah realized she understood everything everyone was saying. She didn't just understand the words. She understood the context, the humor, and the subtle cues in the conversation. This process didn't happen overnight, but through consistent listening and practice, she was able to improve her listening skills and eventually become fluent in speaking. Just like Sarah, you too can improve your English by listening to real-life situations. From casual chats to professional conversations, this is exactly what we're going to practice in this episode. Let's talk about another example. Have you ever had a conversation with someone who used a lot of idiomatic expressions? At first, these phrases might confuse you. I had this experience when I first moved to London. My friend Alex, who was British, said something like, "I'm feeling under the weather today." I thought it was strange because I couldn't see any weather and I wasn't sure what he meant. But over time, I started to recognize common idioms like under the weather, meaning feeling sick, and break the ice, meaning to make someone feel comfortable. Understanding idioms and phrases like these is part of mastering advanced English. It's not just about knowing the vocabulary. It's about understanding the culture behind the language. And that's where real-life exposure comes in. By listening to conversations, whether it's a podcast, a movie, or a news report, you'll start picking up these phrases. And soon, you'll be using them in your own speech. Let's dive into another personal story. Last year, I visited a conference in New York City. The speakers were all experts in their fields, and I was amazed at how fluent and articulate they were. But what stood out to me was how they used pauses in their speech. Instead of filling the silence with or like, they took a brief pause to gather their thoughts. This gave me a new perspective on speaking. It's not about rushing your words. It's about delivering them clearly and confidently. Listening to these professionals helped me realize that silence can be a powerful tool in communication. And that's something you can apply to your own speaking practice. Listen to podcasts or interviews with professionals in fields you're interested in. Notice how they speak, how they structure their sentences, and how they use pauses to emphasize their points. By practicing this in your own speech, you'll sound more natural and confident when speaking English. Now, I'd like you to think about your own experiences. Have you ever been in a situation where you struggled to speak, but listening helped you understand the conversation better? Maybe you were at a business meeting, a family gathering, or even just chatting with friends. Think about how you can use listening to improve your speaking skills. Just like my experiences in Italy, Spain, and New York, real-life examples are key to understanding and mastering advanced English. So, as we move through this episode, I'll share more tips and personal stories that will guide you through improving both your listening and speaking skills. Keep listening. Pay attention to the details. And soon enough, you'll find yourself speaking more confidently and understanding English at a much higher level. Now, let's look at another story that might sound familiar to you. Have you ever been in a situation where you understand most of what someone is saying, but you still feel nervous about speaking up? That's a feeling I know well. When I first started working in an English-speaking environment, I often found myself in meetings where I understood everything being said, but I was hesitant to contribute. I kept thinking, what if I say something wrong? But over time, I realized that the key to improving my speaking skills was simply starting to talk. At first, I made small mistakes, but I learned from them. And soon, I became more comfortable sharing my ideas. The same thing can happen to you. When you listen to others, you can learn how they structure their sentences and how they express their thoughts. This gives you the confidence to try it yourself. Listening to real conversations helps you pick up not only words, but also the rhythm and flow of the language. One of the best ways to improve your listening skills is by listening to a variety of people. Have you ever noticed how people speak differently depending on where they come from? For example, in the United States, you'll hear different accents depending on whether you're in New York or Texas. And in the UK, people in London sound different from people in Manchester. Understanding these differences will help you listen better. The more diverse the sources you listen to, the more you will understand the language in real-life situations. Let's talk about a personal experience I had when I moved to a new city. I was attending a social event where everyone was speaking English, but they were using phrases I had never heard before. It was a bit overwhelming at first, but I decided to pay attention to how they spoke to each other. For example, one person said, "That sounds brilliant," and I had no idea what brilliant meant in this context. But as I listened more, I realized they were using it to mean great or fantastic. By listening and asking a few questions, I learned new phrases that I could start using in my own conversations. This is a big part of improving your speaking skills, getting used to new phrases and expressions that native speakers use. Don't be afraid to ask for clarification if you don't understand something. People are usually happy to help, and that's how you can build your vocabulary and become more comfortable speaking. Another helpful tip is to listen to things that interest you. For example, if you love sports, try listening to podcasts or watching YouTube videos about your favorite team or sport. You'll not only learn the vocabulary related to that topic, but you'll also become more familiar with the natural pace of spoken English. The more you expose yourself to different topics, the easier it will be to understand more complex ideas and express your thoughts clearly. Speaking of which, have you ever tried to tell a story in English? It's a great way to practice your speaking skills. I remember once telling my friend about a trip I took to the beach. I was nervous because I wasn't sure I would be able to explain everything correctly. But as I started talking about the weather, the sand, and the waves, I realized I didn't need to stress about getting every word perfect. What mattered was telling the story and getting my point across. Listening to others tell their stories, and then practicing telling your own, can really help you become a better speaker. Finally, one of the best ways to practice both listening and speaking is by having regular conversations with someone who speaks English. It could be a friend, a colleague, or even a language exchange partner. The more you practice speaking, the easier it becomes. And don't worry if you make mistakes along the way. Every mistake is an opportunity to learn and improve. Just keep listening, keep speaking, and most importantly, enjoy the process. Language learning is a journey, and every step counts. As you continue listening to this episode, pay attention to how I use phrases and structures that will help you improve both your listening and speaking skills. With each story, try to notice how I explain things, how I describe events, and how I express my opinions. These are all tools you can use in your own conversations. Now, let's dive into another story that helped me improve my listening and speaking skills. A few years ago, I had the chance to work in a team with people from different countries. Some of them spoke English very fluently, while others were still learning. It was interesting to see how we all communicated. First, I felt nervous when they spoke so fast or used words I didn't know. But instead of worrying, I decided to focus on what I understood. Slowly, I picked up words I hadn't heard before, and I started to feel more comfortable joining in on conversations. One thing I learned from this experience is that listening isn't just about understanding every single word. It's about understanding the main idea and the emotions behind what someone is saying. For example, even if you don't know all the words, you can often understand if someone is happy, excited, or frustrated just by their tone of voice or body language. This made me realize that listening carefully can help you not only with understanding language, but also with understanding how people are feeling. The same happens when you listen to real-life stories or podcasts in English. It's not always about catching every word. Sometimes it's more about catching the main message. The more you listen, the better you'll get at understanding the bigger picture and the details that matter. Let me share another example of how listening can improve your speaking. A few months ago, I attended a professional workshop where everyone was speaking English. There were so many new words and terms I hadn't heard before. But I decided to focus on the overall message instead of stressing over the individual words. Later, I practiced explaining the key points to my friend in simple English. I didn't worry too much about using complex phrases. I just focused on sharing the main ideas in my own words. This helped me improve my speaking skills and build confidence in using new vocabulary in everyday situations. The key is to listen actively. For example, when you're watching a movie or listening to a podcast, try to pay attention to how the speakers say things, not just what they say. Notice how they use different tones, pauses, or emphasis. These small details can make a huge difference in how you speak and understand English. You can even try repeating some of the phrases you hear, using the same tone and style. This kind of practice will help you sound more natural when speaking. Think about a time when you tried to explain something in English, and maybe you didn't find the right words right away. It's totally normal. The important thing is to keep trying. When you listen to how native speakers express themselves, you'll learn how to put your thoughts together more clearly. Over time, you'll find it easier to form sentences, even when you don't know every word you want to say. One thing that really helped me improve my speaking was watching TED Talks. These talks are not only informative, but they also show how to express ideas clearly and confidently in English. I would listen to a TED Talk and then try to explain what I learned to someone else in my own words. This gave me practice with both listening and speaking, and I also picked up useful phrases that I could use in my own conversations. Have you ever thought about how listening to different types of content can help you improve both your listening and speaking skills? You don't have to just stick to podcasts or news reports. Try listening to interviews, stories, or even interviews with people you admire. You'll start to recognize different speech patterns, ways to introduce topics, and how to express emotions through language. By doing this, you'll get better at understanding different accents, speeds, and speaking styles. It's like training your ear to recognize the variety of ways English can be spoken. Let me tell you about another way to improve your speaking through listening. Last year, I joined a book club where we discussed a new book every month. At first, I wasn't sure I would be able to speak fluently about the book, but listening to how others express their thoughts helped me a lot. They used some advanced vocabulary, and I learned new ways to express my opinions. Each time I participated, I felt more confident. I even began using new vocabulary from the book in my conversations with friends. This is a great example of how listening and speaking can go hand in hand. The more you listen to how people talk about a topic, the more you'll feel prepared to speak about it yourself. Whether you're talking about a book, a movie, or even something in your daily life, listening to others gives you the tools you need to express your ideas more clearly. Have you noticed how sometimes, when you're listening to a conversation, you begin to form your response in your mind before the other person finishes speaking? This is a great sign. It means you're becoming more fluent in the language. The more you listen to English, the more you'll start to think in English. This process will help you speak faster and more naturally as your brain gets used to processing the language. So, the more you expose yourself to English conversations, the easier it becomes to understand and respond. Next time you're listening to a podcast or watching a video in English, try to repeat some of the key phrases or sentences. It might feel a little awkward at first, but with practice, you'll sound more confident and fluent. The more you practice, the better your speaking will become. In this episode, we've talked about a lot of ways to improve your listening and speaking skills. From real-life stories to practical tips, the main point is to keep practicing and never give up. Even when you make mistakes, keep listening and keep speaking. It's all part of the learning process. The more you expose yourself to English, the more natural it will feel. And soon, you'll be speaking with confidence in any situation. Here's another story that might sound familiar to you. When I was in college, I remember how nervous I felt during my first group presentation in English. My team was tasked with presenting a project to our classmates, and I was terrified. Even though I had prepared and knew the material, speaking in front of so many people in English was intimidating that I worried that I might forget my words or pronounce something incorrectly. But then, I remembered the advice my professor gave us. Just focus on communicating the idea, not on being perfect. I took a deep breath and started to speak. The more I talked, the more confident I felt. I noticed that the audience wasn't focused on my mistakes. They were focused on the content of my presentation. After the presentation, my teammates and I received great feedback. And I realized that listening to how others spoke in class had actually helped me feel more comfortable. That experience taught me an important lesson. It's okay to make mistakes, especially when you're practicing. What matters is how you communicate your ideas and how willing you are to keep trying. The more you practice speaking, whether it's for a presentation or just a simple conversation, the better you'll become at expressing yourself clearly. Let's talk about something that can also help boost your speaking skills: storytelling. Have you ever told a story in English to a friend or classmate? Storytelling can be a powerful way to practice speaking because it allows you to focus on describing events in detail. It's a bit like giving a mini presentation about your life. For example, last week I shared a funny story with my friends about a trip I took to the mountains. I had to explain how I got lost during a hike, how I met some friendly locals, and how I eventually found my way back. I noticed that as I told the story, I used different phrases and vocabulary that I had picked up from listening to others. My friends were engaged, and I felt confident because I was talking about something that happened to me, something real. Storytelling is a great way to practice both listening and speaking. By listening to others tell their stories, you can pick up new phrases and ways to explain things. And when you share your own stories, you get to practice using those phrases in context. It's a cycle of learning that helps improve both your speaking and listening skills. Another important part of listening and speaking is understanding how to adapt your language depending on who you're talking to. For example, when you're speaking to your friends, you might use informal language and casual expressions. But when you're talking to a professor, a boss, or someone you don't know well, you need to use more formal language. This is something I learned when I started doing group work in college. In one of my classes, we had to discuss a complex topic in a group. At first, I was using very casual language, which was fine with my friends. But when I spoke to the professor, I realized that my informal language wasn't appropriate. I quickly adapted and started using more formal expressions to explain my ideas. That I also noticed that by listening to how my classmates spoke during the discussion, I learned the right balance between being professional and still sounding natural. This experience taught me that language isn't just about knowing words. It's about knowing when to use them. This is a key part of both listening and speaking. When you listen to how people speak in different situations, you begin to understand what's expected and how to adjust your language accordingly. Let me tell you a short story from my college life. One semester, I was involved in a language exchange program where I was paired with a student from another country who wanted to practice English. We would meet once a week, and our goal was to improve both our listening and speaking skills. At first, I felt a bit uncomfortable because I wasn't sure if I'd be able to help her. But as we spoke more, I realized that we both learned from each other. She taught me new words in her language, and I helped her with English pronunciation and grammar. Over time, I became more confident in my ability to listen and respond in English. This experience also reminded me that the more you expose yourself to real-life conversations, the better you get at understanding the language. Language exchange programs, or even casual conversations with friends, can be a great way to practice and improve your skills. Now, think about a time when you were able to understand a conversation in English, but you didn't feel confident enough to join in. Maybe it was a conversation in a cafe, at school, or even during a meeting at work. I've been there too, and it's completely normal. But over time, as you listen more and practice speaking, you'll start to feel more comfortable. The key is to keep pushing yourself, even when it feels a little uncomfortable. And here's something that helped me when I didn't feel confident speaking. I would start by listening to short conversations in English and trying to repeat what I heard. I would pay attention to how people said things, their tone of voice, and how they used expressions in different situations. This helped me understand how to use the right words in the right context. It was like learning to ride a bike. You don't get it right away, but the more you practice, the easier it becomes. This method not only improved my listening skills, but also gave me the courage to start speaking more. You can do the same by listening to conversations on YouTube, podcasts, or even TV shows in English. Pick topics you enjoy and focus on the way the speakers express themselves. When you're ready, try to join in by repeating phrases or sentences. This will help you feel more natural when speaking in real conversations. That it's important to remember that language learning is a journey, and every step you take brings you closer to your goal. Even if you make mistakes along the way, don't get discouraged. Each mistake is a lesson, and with each one, you'll get better at listening and speaking. So, keep practicing, keep listening, and keep speaking. You'll find that the more you immerse yourself in the language, the easier it will be to understand and communicate in English. And soon, you'll be able to speak with confidence, no matter the situation. Let me tell you about a time in college when I really learned the value of listening. One of my classes had a group discussion on a very challenging topic, and I wasn't sure if I would be able to keep up with the conversation. At first, I felt nervous because some of my classmates were speaking in advanced English, using words and phrases I hadn't heard before. But instead of worrying about what I didn't know, I decided to focus on the overall meaning of what was being said. I remember one of my classmates, Sarah, who was a fluent speaker. She explained a complex idea, and even though I didn't understand all the words, I could follow her reasoning and feel the excitement in her voice. Her enthusiasm made the topic more interesting, and I started to piece together the meaning from the context and tone. After the discussion, I was able to join the conversation and share my thoughts on the topic, and it felt amazing to be part of it. This experience taught me a lot about the importance of context and listening. Even when you don't understand every word, you can often figure out the meaning by listening to how the speaker feels about the topic. This made me realize that listening is about more than just hearing words. It's about understanding emotions and ideas. This can also help with your speaking skills. For example, if you're having a conversation and you don't know a specific word, you can use other words to explain your idea. This is something I learned when I was practicing English with my friend Alex. Sometimes we would both struggle with vocabulary, but we tried to explain the meaning of the word using simpler words. Doing this helped both of us speak more clearly and confidently, even when we didn't have the perfect word. Now, let me share a funny little story. A while ago, I was listening to a podcast where the hosts were talking about their travels to different countries. One of them, Mark, shared a hilarious story about getting lost in a small village in Italy. He didn't speak Italian very well, and he had trouble understanding the directions from the locals. But instead of feeling frustrated, he decided to laugh it off and asked for help from a group of people at a cafe. To his surprise, they all spoke a little bit of English and guided him back to the right path. His story made me laugh, and it also reminded me of how important it is to stay positive even when you don't understand everything around you. This brings us to a useful tip for improving your English. Don't be afraid to ask questions if you don't understand something. I used to hesitate when I didn't understand a word or phrase. But then I realized that asking for clarification is a great way to learn. In fact, the more questions you ask, the more you'll understand, and the more confident you'll become when speaking. Whether you're in class, at work, or talking to friends, asking questions can open up opportunities to learn new words and ideas. In college, I had a classmate named Sam who wasn't afraid to ask questions. Even if he didn't know a word, he would ask the professor or his classmates to explain. I remember once when we were discussing a book in class, Sam didn't know the meaning of a particular phrase. Instead of staying quiet, he asked the professor to explain it. By asking that question, Sam not only learned the meaning of the phrase, but also helped everyone else understand it better, including me. His confidence in asking questions inspired me to be more open about asking for help when I didn't understand something. Asking questions also helps you learn new ways to express yourself. For example, if you hear someone say something in a way that sounds interesting or different, don't hesitate to ask how they said it. This will expand your vocabulary and help you sound more natural when speaking. I learned this when I started having more conversations with native speakers. They would use expressions I wasn't familiar with, and by asking them to explain, I learned how to use those expressions in my own conversations. Now, I'd like to talk about something else that helped me improve my listening and speaking: watching movies in English. When I was in college, I started watching movies without subtitles to challenge myself. At first, it was tough because I couldn't understand everything. But gradually, I got better. I began to pick up on phrases, slang, and even accents that I didn't hear before. Watching movies is not only fun, but also a great way to improve your listening skills. Plus, you get to hear how people speak in real-life situations, which helps you learn how to express yourself more naturally. Let's take one of my favorite movies, for example, The Pursuit of Happiness. The main character, played by Will Smith, goes through many struggles, but he never gives up. One part of the movie really stuck with me. He says, "You got a dream, you got to protect it." This line was simple but powerful. The way he said it with so much emotion made it memorable. I tried to repeat that phrase to practice my pronunciation, and I noticed that by mimicking the emotion behind it, I could sound more confident too. Another way to improve your listening and speaking skills is through group discussions. In college, I participated in many group projects, and every time we met, I paid close attention to how my classmates expressed their ideas. One thing I noticed was that everyone had a unique way of speaking. Some were more formal, while others were more casual. By listening to them, I learned how to adjust my own language depending on the situation. I learned when to be more formal in academic settings and when it was okay to be more casual with friends. This helped me communicate more effectively in both personal and professional environments. This is something I encourage you to try. Find a group of friends, classmates, or colleagues who are also learning English and start having discussions with them. It could be about anything: your favorite movies, a recent news event, or something you're passionate about. By listening to others and practicing speaking, you'll improve both your understanding and your ability to express yourself. And don't worry about making mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes when they're learning, and it's part of the process. The more you practice, the less you'll worry about being perfect. Keep listening to English content, whether it's podcasts, movies, or conversations with friends. The more you listen, the more your speaking will improve. It's all about consistency and practice. Let's talk a bit about how you can make the most out of your listening practice. One technique that helped me a lot was listening to the same audio more than once. At first, I would listen to a podcast or an interview, and I could catch only a few words or phrases. But when I listened again, I started noticing things I missed the first time. This technique is called active listening. It's when you pay close attention to every word and try to understand the meaning behind it. It really helped me understand more and improved my vocabulary too. For example, I was listening to an interview with a writer once. She talked about how she became successful and all the challenges she faced. On my first listen, I didn't catch many details. But on the second listen, I understood what she meant by perseverance and dedication. I looked up the words, and it expanded my vocabulary. Listening more than once is a great way to really dive deep into the content and improve your language skills. Another thing I learned is how important it is to balance your listening and speaking practice. While listening to English is vital, Speaking helps you process what you hear and use it in real conversations. One of the best ways to improve is by repeating what you hear. I do this a lot with interviews and podcasts. When I hear an interesting sentence or phrase, I repeat it out loud to practice my pronunciation. This technique is called shadowing. It's great for improving both your listening and speaking because you're trying to mimic the speaker's voice, tone, and rhythm. In fact, I did this while learning a new word in a podcast about technology. The speaker used the word innovative and explained how it's important in today's world of technology. I repeated the word several times and even used it in my own conversations. Shadowing like this helped me remember the word and use it naturally in different contexts. Speaking of technology, let's dive into how understanding new terms in tech can improve your listening skills. We're surrounded by technology, so it's a great idea to stay updated on tech news and listen to how experts talk about it. The more you listen to technical language, the more familiar it becomes. Plus, it's a great way to expand your vocabulary. I know when I first started listening to podcasts about technology, I had a hard time understanding some of the jargon. But over time, by listening repeatedly and researching new terms, I was able to follow along and even contribute to conversations about it. There's another story I want to share from my college days. I took a class on business communication where we had to present our ideas in front of the class. One day, we had a guest speaker who was an entrepreneur. He shared his journey and how he built his business. His story was full of useful vocabulary that I didn't know before. I had to listen very carefully to understand his business terminology, like market research, customer demographics, and branding. After the lecture, I wrote down all the new terms I heard and looked them up. This made me more confident in my ability to understand business English and also improved my speaking when I was discussing business topics with friends. What I learned from that experience is that listening to stories in any area, whether it's business, technology, or even personal experiences, gives you the opportunity to hear new phrases and expressions. These stories help you understand how to use words naturally in different situations. They also expose you to different accents and ways of speaking, which can make you a better listener. Have you ever noticed how different people speak about the same thing? For example, one person might talk about their vacation in a very detailed and excited way, while another person might speak more casually and briefly. Listening to these differences can help you understand how tone, emotion, and context affect the way we speak. It's also a great way to learn how to express your thoughts in different ways, depending on who you're talking to. In college, I had a group project where we had to present about global warming. Each member of the group had a different speaking style. One person, Maria, was very formal and used lots of facts and statistics, while another, James, was more casual and focused on the emotional impact of global warming. While listening to both of them, I learned how to balance facts with emotion when presenting an idea. This helped me when I had to do my own presentations, as I understood that different situations required different speaking styles. The key takeaway here is that listening to a variety of speakers, whether they're giving formal presentations or telling stories, helps you become more flexible in your speaking. You learn how to switch between formal and informal language depending on the situation. This is especially important for advanced English learners, as it will allow you to communicate confidently in many different contexts. And remember, it's okay to take your time with listening. Don't expect to understand everything right away. It's a gradual process. I remember when I started listening to news podcasts, I could only understand about 30% of what was said. But over time, and after listening to the same topics over and over, I improved. The key is to be patient and keep practicing. By listening to real-life stories, podcasts, interviews, or even movies, you'll not only improve your listening skills, but also your speaking ability. You'll learn how to express yourself better and feel more confident when talking to others. Keep practicing. And remember, learning English is a journey that takes time. Stay motivated and enjoy the process. Let me tell you about a time during my college days when I struggled with a presentation. It was a group project, and we had to present our research about climate change in front of the class. My part was about the effects of global warming on the oceans, and I knew I had to explain it clearly to make everyone understand. But when the day of the presentation arrived, I suddenly felt nervous. I had all the facts in my notes, but I was worried about whether I could explain them well. I started to panic. But then I remembered something important. It's not just about the facts, but about how you tell the story behind those facts. I decided to focus on telling the story of how our oceans are changing and why it matters to everyone. Instead of just listing data, I shared a simple story that I had read about a small island being affected by rising sea levels. This story helped my classmates connect emotionally with the topic. As I spoke, I looked around and noticed my classmates were paying attention. I felt more confident because I wasn't just talking about dry facts. I was sharing a real-life example that people could relate to. After the presentation, I received great feedback from my professor and classmates. They appreciated the story I told and how it helped them understand the topic better. This experience taught me that listening to stories and using them in your own speaking can make your message clearer and more memorable. This brings me to a key point. When you're learning a language, it's helpful to listen to a variety of stories. You can listen to personal stories, news stories, or even fictional stories. The more you listen to different kinds of stories, the better you'll get at understanding different ways of speaking. For instance, when you listen to personal stories, you'll hear a more casual, conversational style of speaking. On the other hand, news reports usually have a formal tone with lots of facts. By listening to both, you'll learn how to adjust your language based on the situation. Speaking of stories, let me share a funny little college story that helped me learn English in a way I didn't expect. One day, I was hanging out with some friends in the campus cafeteria when one of them, named Ben, started telling us about a trip he took to Japan. Ben wasn't the best at English, and sometimes he used the wrong words. But his stories were so interesting that we all listened carefully and tried to understand him. He told us about how he accidentally ordered something in a restaurant that he didn't want because he didn't know the word for vegetarian. We all laughed at his mistake, and it made me realize how powerful communication is, even when you don't know every word perfectly. What mattered was that Ben told us the story in a way that we could understand, and we could all connect with his experience. That story showed me that you don't have to be perfect in English to share something important. You just need to get your message across. And the more you practice, the better you'll get. Ben's story reminded me that mistakes are part of learning, and it's okay to make them. It's about communicating and connecting with others, not about being flawless. If you're wondering how to improve your own speaking and listening, here's a tip. Practice telling your own stories. Think of a funny experience you've had or a memorable moment in your life, and try to tell that story in English. The more you practice telling stories, the more natural your speaking will become. And by telling stories, you also improve your listening because you learn how to focus on details and think about the most important parts of what you're saying. I also found that listening to conversations in movies or TV shows was very helpful. For example, I watched a show called Friends when I was in college, and even though it's a comedy, I learned a lot of useful everyday language from it. The characters talked about simple things like going to the store, talking to their friends, or dealing with work problems that IT was like listening to real-life situations. And it helped me improve my speaking because I learned how to use casual phrases and idioms that I could use in my own conversations. Point one thing that really stuck with me from Friends was a phrase that Joey, one of the characters, often used. How you doing? At first, I didn't know why it was so funny. But then I realized it was a playful, informal way of asking how someone was. It's a perfect example of how movies and TV shows can teach you the informal language that you don't always learn from textbooks. These types of shows also teach you about timing, tone, and how to express emotions in a conversation. Now think about this. When you're listening to your favorite movie or TV show, pay attention to how the actors use their voices. Notice how they change their tone depending on what's happening in the scene. For example, when they're excited or surprised, their voices sound different than when they're serious or sad. This can teach you how to express your own emotions when speaking English. In college, I had a professor who always told us, you don't just learn a language by studying grammar and vocabulary. You learn it by using it. This advice stuck with me throughout my studies. I began to notice that the more I used English in real-life situations, the easier it became to understand it. Whether it was asking for directions on a trip, participating in group projects, or just chatting with friends, every conversation was an opportunity to improve my skills. One of my favorite memories from college was when I went on a road trip with a group of friends. We drove to a small town and stayed in a cozy bed and breakfast. The owner of the place, an older man named George, told us stories about the town's history. He wasn't speaking in perfect English, but his stories were so captivating that we didn't mind. His voice had so much emotion, and the way he told his stories made us feel like we were part of the history he was describing. This experience taught me that listening isn't just about hearing words. It's about connecting with the person who is speaking and understanding the message behind their words. These experiences taught me that language learning isn't just about memorizing rules and words. It's about listening to the stories around you, understanding the emotions in someone's voice, and practicing speaking in different situations. So, whether it's watching a TV show, listening to a podcast, or chatting with friends, every opportunity to listen and speak is a chance to improve your skills and build confidence. During my college years, I remember a time when I had to give a speech for my public speaking class. I was terrified. Public speaking was one of the things I feared most, even though I had been practicing English for years. My friends could speak confidently in English, but I felt my heart race every time I had to speak in front of a group. The topic I had to speak about was the impact of social media on society. It was something I had read about, and I had ideas, but I struggled to put them into words. As the day of the speech approached, I practiced in front of the mirror, speaking out loud. At first, I stumbled over my words, but I kept going. My roommate, Lisa, who was also a student, would listen and help me out. Sometimes she would give me suggestions on how to explain things more simply or in a way that felt more natural. That's when I realized the value of practicing with someone else. It's not just about learning the language, but also about learning how to speak it in a way that others can easily understand. The day of the speech came, and I was nervous, but I had a plan. I started my speech with a simple story about how social media had changed the way we connect with friends. I told the class about a time when I reconnected with an old friend through Facebook. That story made the topic more personal and engaging, and I could feel my confidence growing as I spoke. The more I spoke, the less nervous I became. I realized that speaking English wasn't about being perfect. It was about sharing something with the people listening to you. After the speech, my professor and classmates gave me positive feedback. They said the story I shared made the topic clear and more relatable. That experience taught me that it's okay to make mistakes, and what matters most is the message you're trying to communicate. In fact, when you listen to others speak, especially in English, try to pay attention to the stories they tell. It's not just about the vocabulary or grammar, it's about how the story is told. Does the speaker sound excited or nervous? Are they speaking quickly or slowly? These things can tell you a lot about how to speak more naturally. For example, in a conversation, people don't just focus on the words, they focus on the emotions behind those words. I once attended a seminar where the speaker was talking about the importance of teamwork. The way he spoke with energy and enthusiasm made me believe in his message. He wasn't just telling facts. He was making us feel the importance of the topic. Listening to people who speak with emotion can teach you how to add energy and passion to your own speaking. Think about how you might describe your favorite hobby or a fun trip you took. When you tell the story, you're not just listing facts. You're telling about the experiences, the emotions, and the fun moments. The more you practice speaking like this, the more natural it will feel. And when you listen to others tell stories, you'll get a better sense of how to use your voice and emotions to make your own speaking more interesting. Another memory I have from college is of a friend, Sam, who loved to tell funny stories. Sam wasn't the best at English, but his sense of humor made everyone laugh. One day, he was telling us about his trip to a theme park. Sam explained how he tried to ride the roller coaster, but when the ride started, he got so scared that he ended up screaming and holding on to the bar for dear life. His story wasn't perfect, but the way he told it with all the funny details made everyone laugh. His story was a great example of how speaking isn't about being perfect, but about sharing your experiences in a way that connects with people. Sam's story also showed me how important it is to find your own style of speaking. Some people like to tell stories with a lot of excitement and energy, while others may be more relaxed and detailed. Both ways are okay. The key is to feel comfortable in your own way of expressing yourself, and the more you practice speaking in different situations, the more you'll find your style. To help improve your listening, try listening to people who tell stories in different ways. You can listen to podcasts, interviews, or even people in your own life. Pay attention to how they tell their stories. Do they focus on the details? Do they use humor? How do they make the story interesting? The more you listen, the better you'll understand how to structure your own stories when you speak. A fun way to practice is by listening to stories in movies or books. For example, one of my favorite books is Harry Potter. The way the author describes characters and events makes you feel like you're right there with them. When you listen to books like this, try to imagine how you would tell the story in your own words. This will help you get better at speaking because you're practicing how to retell something in your own way. It's also a great way to build your vocabulary, as you'll come across new words and phrases that you can use in your own conversations. Imagine you're telling someone about a vacation you went on. You could just say, "I went to the beach." But that's not as interesting. Instead, you could say, "I went to a beautiful beach last summer. The sand was warm, and the waves were perfect for surfing. I had the best time of my life." By adding a few more details and describing the experience, your story becomes much more engaging. If you're feeling nervous about speaking, remember that it's okay to take your time. In college, I had a friend who struggled with speaking, but over time he got better by simply talking more often. He would chat with friends, participate in discussions, and even try speaking in English in everyday situations, like ordering food at a restaurant. Gradually, he became more confident, and his speaking improved. Just like with anything else, the more you practice, the easier it becomes. So, when you listen to stories, try to think about how you would tell the story if you were speaking. What details would you include? How would you describe the emotions or feelings? The more you practice, the better your speaking and listening skills will become. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about improving little by little until speaking and listening becomes second nature. I once had a professor in college, Professor Harris, who had a unique way of teaching. Instead of giving long lectures, he would tell us stories from his own life, stories that made us laugh, think, and sometimes even reflect on our own choices. One story he told us was about his time studying abroad in France. He was a young student back then, and one day he found himself lost in the streets of Paris. He didn't speak much French, and the city seemed so big and confusing. As he wandered, he came across a small cafe and decided to go in for a cup of coffee. The owner of the cafe, an old man with glasses, greeted him in French. Now, Professor Harris didn't understand a word, but he smiled, pointed to the coffee machine, and said, "Cafe, please." The cafe owner, who spoke no English, smiled and handed him a cup of coffee. The situation was awkward, but it made Professor Harris realize that sometimes communication isn't about the words you say. It's about the effort you make to connect with others, even if you don't speak the same language. And that's what I love about stories. They remind us of the simple moments in life that have a deeper meaning. The story Professor Harris shared made me think about how important it is to be brave when speaking English. You might not always know the exact words or grammar, but if you keep trying, people will understand you. And sometimes, just by being patient and friendly, you'll make new friends or even learn something valuable. One thing that I learned in college was that language isn't just about what you say, but also how you say it. I remember a time when I was in a group discussion. I was talking about a book I had recently read, and I could see some of my classmates getting distracted. But then I decided to add a personal twist to the discussion. Instead of just summarizing the book, I told them about how the main character's choices reminded me of a decision I had to make when I was in high school. Suddenly, everyone's attention was on me. They were listening closely, not just to the details of the book, but to the connection I had made to my own life. That experience taught me the importance of making your language personal. When you speak, try to connect what you're saying to something real or relatable. Whether it's a personal story or an interesting fact, sharing something of yourself can make your words more engaging. This idea also applies to listening. When you listen to a speaker, try to pick out the personal moments in their story. What makes their story unique? What are they sharing that connects to something larger than just the facts? When you start to listen this way, you'll not only improve your listening skills, but you'll also understand the deeper meaning behind what people say. Another example from college comes to mind. This time, it's a bit of a fantasy story. A friend of mine, Ethan, had a huge interest in space. He would always talk about how cool it would be to go to space and see the stars up close. One day, he told us that he had dreamed of being an astronaut when he was younger. But then, maybe a funny twist, he said, "You know, if I went to space, I'd probably just be floating around, trying to find my way back to Earth." We all laughed. But what I loved about Ethan's story was how he took something serious like space exploration and made it personal and funny. He didn't just talk about spaceships or planets. Instead, he told us how he imagined himself in a situation, making it funny and relatable. This is something we can all learn from. When you speak, try to add humor or a personal perspective to make your words more interesting. In fact, humor is an excellent way to connect with people. When you listen to someone who tells a story with humor, you not only understand their words, but also feel their emotions. Humor is one of those things that transcends language. Even if you don't understand every single word, the feeling behind the story is clear. Now, let's think about a different kind of story, one that might sound familiar to many of you. It's the story of trying to learn a new skill. I remember when I first started learning how to play guitar. At first, I could barely strum the strings. My fingers didn't move the way I wanted them to, and I kept making mistakes. But I didn't give up. Slowly, I improved. I started playing simple songs, and over time, I became better at it. I tell you this story because it's a great reminder that learning anything, including a language, is a process. It's not always easy, but the more you practice, the better you get. Just like with the guitar, learning English takes time. You might make mistakes along the way, but that's okay. The important thing is that you keep going. Every time you practice, you're improving. And just like learning any skill, speaking and listening in English gets easier the more you do it. In college, I had a friend named Sarah who struggled with English. She was always so hard on herself. She would make a mistake and then apologize over and over again. One day, I told her that it was okay to make mistakes and that everyone does. Mistakes are part of learning, I said. After that, she started speaking more freely. She stopped worrying about being perfect, and her speaking improved. It was inspiring to see her confidence grow, and it reminded me that it's okay to take risks when speaking a new language. Just like Sarah, you can improve by embracing your mistakes. It's all about taking one step at a time and celebrating the small victories. Maybe today you said a sentence correctly that you couldn't say last week. Maybe you understood something in English that you didn't understand before. Those small victories add up, and soon you'll be speaking with more confidence. As you continue listening to English speakers and practicing your own speaking. Remember that the more you listen to stories, the better you'll become at understanding and telling your own stories. Whether it's a real-life experience or a made-up fantasy, stories make language more fun and engaging. So, keep listening, keep practicing, and keep sharing your own stories. I remember one particular moment during my college years that helped me realize how important speaking with confidence really is. It was the day of our final presentation for a major project. My friend Mark, who was usually shy, had to present his part of the project to the entire class. He had spent weeks preparing and knew his topic well. But when it was his turn, he stood up, hesitated for a moment, and then started talking in a quiet voice. As he spoke, I could see the nervousness in his eyes, and his voice became harder to hear. It wasn't because he didn't know the information. He knew it very well. But his lack of confidence made it harder for the class to focus on what he was saying. After his presentation, I talked to him and told him how important it was to speak clearly and confidently, even if he was nervous. Later on, during another project, Mark decided to focus on speaking with more confidence. He practiced at home, used deep breaths before speaking, and made sure his voice was loud and clear. This time, when he presented, he owned the room. His voice was strong, his gestures were confident, and the entire class listened to him attentively. It wasn't that he had become an expert speaker overnight, but his improvement was noticeable. This experience taught me that when you speak with confidence, people listen more closely. Even if you're still learning, speaking with belief in your words helps others understand you better. And this is especially important when learning English. Don't be afraid to speak. Even if your grammar or vocabulary isn't perfect, What matters most is getting your message across and having the confidence to try. Let's talk about another college experience. This time, it's a bit more fantasy-like. Imagine being in a magical university where the students are learning not only about math, science, and history, but also about how to communicate with magical creatures. Point one of my classmates, Lily, was studying the language of the dragons. It wasn't a typical class like the others, but it was fascinating. Lily had always been a strong communicator, and she had an amazing ability to listen closely to others. She told us that when she was studying the language of dragons, it wasn't just about memorizing words. It was about understanding the tone, the gestures, and the emotions behind the words. Dragons, she said, didn't communicate in simple sentences. Instead, they conveyed their thoughts through their tone, body language, and even the sounds they made. The story Lily shared helped me realize how important listening skills are in any language. When you learn a new language, it's not just about understanding the words. It's about understanding the meaning behind them. And that requires careful listening. Whether you're speaking with a person, a dragon, or anyone else, it's the way you listen and understand that makes communication powerful. In a way, this concept applies to learning English as well. It's not just about knowing the vocabulary or grammar rules. It's about paying attention to the tone, the rhythm, and the emotions behind the words. Listening carefully can make a huge difference in your ability to understand and speak English more fluently. This brings me to another experience I had in college. We were given the task of debating a controversial topic. At first, I was nervous because I had never really participated in debates before. But then my professor reminded us that debates weren't just about winning. They were about understanding different perspectives. I realized that listening was just as important as speaking in a debate. In the debate, I had to listen carefully to the opposing side's arguments and respond thoughtfully. It was challenging, but it helped me understand how to engage with different points of view. Listening actively without interrupting, and then responding with clear, confident arguments was key to succeeding in the debate. In real-life conversations, it's just as important to listen actively and respond in a way that shows you understand the other person's point of view. This is something that helps not just in debates, but in any situation where you need to communicate effectively. The more you practice listening and speaking, the more comfortable you will become in various situations. Whether it's in a classroom, at work, or even in everyday conversations, the key is to keep practicing and don't be afraid of making mistakes. Every time you speak, you're learning. And every time you listen, you're improving your understanding. I'll share one more story with you. This one about a time when I had to use English in an unexpected situation. It was during a summer internship, and I was working with a team of people from different countries. One day, we had a meeting where we had to discuss a new project, and everyone was speaking in English. At first, I felt a little overwhelmed. There were people from all over the world, and I wasn't sure I would be able to keep up. But as the meeting went on, I realized that the key was to focus on the main points and not get too caught up in the details. Everyone was speaking at different speeds, and the accents were different too. But I learned to listen carefully and pick up the important information. I also started using some strategies to speak more clearly. I would pause before responding to gather my thoughts, and I made sure to speak slowly so everyone could follow along. Slowly, I became more comfortable, and by the end of the meeting, I was able to contribute my ideas and even explain some points in detail. This experience taught me that listening and speaking in real-world situations can be tricky, but with practice, you become more confident. The key is not to be afraid of the challenges, but to embrace them as opportunities to improve your skills. As you continue your journey in improving your English, remember that both listening and speaking are like muscles. The more you practice, the stronger they get. Don't be afraid of making mistakes, because each one is an opportunity to grow. And just like in the stories I shared, whether it's about speaking confidently in front of a class, understanding a dragon's language, or navigating a challenging meeting, the key is to keep learning and improving every day. Before we wrap up, I want to remind you of something important. Improving your English listening and speaking skills is a journey, not a race. Every small step you take brings you closer to becoming more confident and fluent. Whether it's learning from a story, practicing with friends, or speaking up in a group, each effort counts. Remember, making mistakes is part of the process. Embrace them, learn from them, and keep moving forward. Take time to listen to real-life conversations, repeat phrases, and practice speaking whenever you can. The more you do it, the easier it will become. Thank you for joining me today. I hope these stories and examples inspired you to take on new challenges in your English learning journey. Keep practicing, stay curious, and remember, you've got this. See you next time. Summary. This episode used powerful, real-life stories to demonstrate that improving your English listening and speaking skills is an interconnected process. The key lessons are: listening is the foundation of speaking. The more you immerse yourself in authentic English through podcasts, movies, and conversations, the more you naturally absorb the rhythm, vocabulary, and flow of the language, making it easier to speak. Embrace mistakes and practice consistently. Confidence doesn't come from being perfect, but from being willing to try. Every mistake is a learning opportunity. Regular practice, especially through storytelling, is crucial for improvement. Learn from diverse sources. Expose yourself to different accents, speaking styles, formal and informal, and topics. This flexibility will allow you to understand and communicate effectively in any situation. Understand the why behind the words. Advanced proficiency involves understanding cultural context, idioms, emotions, and body language, not just vocabulary lists. Your call to action. Your journey to fluency starts now. Choose one action to take today. Find one English podcast on a topic you love and listen to it on your commute. Watch a scene from your favorite movie in English and try to shadow, repeat, the dialogue. Tell a short story from your life in English to a friend, a language partner, or even just to yourself. Keep listening, keep speaking, and trust the process. You can do this.